Robert Redboy Connelly was a lonely old man who had burnt down almost all his bridges to the rest of the world, and found himself on an island to himself, a violent and aggressive man with his own bloody tale to tell. Robert had come home from a long day of work and had found his son sniffling over something. This didn't sit well with the old tyrant, as he began instantly smacking Michael around some and really started pounding in his fists. When the boy wouldn't let up and started crying louder, by the end Robert had his son bleeding on the floor with a broken nose, 2 broken ribs, and his face all bruised up, looking as blue as the New England coast on a cloudy day winter morning. Once he had gotten his son to stop crying, that's when he had stopped. For chances were, if that little pipsqueak was to continue crying anymore, Robert might have gone truly overboard and flat out murdered him. Once his son stopped crying, Robert looked down at him and shook his head, and then decided the only way he was going to get through with him now is by telling him a story. A story about how he used to be. You know, I'll teach you something. I'll teach you something about being a man, said Robert Connelly as he began his tale. Michael looked away then and tried to hold his nose as it continued to gush with blood. Maybe it'll get through your head, and maybe it won't, but I'm gonna tell it to you anyways, because you need to learn this, said Robbie Connelly, flat toned with zero expression. Michael had then grown frightened as his father began staring him so, with eyes enraptured with horrors only he could see, eyes as covered over with shrouds, covering and hiding details into his inner being. This is an old story of something that happened between me and an old friend of mine, sometime before you were born, back in the early 50s in LA. Now, not all the details are true, but I'm gonna tell it to you in a way so you get me now and understand why I keep giving you lickings like these. Anyways, this old friend of mine used to be a man that had never taken a licking in his life, was never in WW2 or the Korean War, a true pansy. Me and the rest of the bloody Shamrocks always had a deal with. Real beatnik, who I personally initiated and made him a part of us. Was such a fucking pansy at one point. We called him Frenchy Boy for it. Anyways, you see, when you're dealing with the sort that has never taken a good licking before, when you first meet them, the sort will smile at you, all queer-like, with open eyes, like they wanted to be bestest of friends. But little does they know the type of man they're dealing with. Little did he know, Frenchy Boy did, the type of man out there that maybe ain't too good to be friends with. Robert Connelly then paused and grew a faintly amused smirk on his face. He wants to be my friend, okay? He wants to be my friend, okay? So being such a swell friend that I was, you know what I did? I punched and broke his stupid fucking nose and shattered it like glass. And then as his eyes blew up, he became stupid with disbelief and whined like a little girl in pain, crying, "Why did you do that? What have I done to deserve this? Why are you being mean to me?" And his heart sort of cracked up a bit at the thought that there could be men out there like me that might have zero compassion for him, or even zero compassion for anyone or anything for that matter. And these men could possibly be so cruel and evil that they would find a dark sense of humor doing what I did, recounted Robert Connelly as his smirk grew wider. A week later, he sees me smiling at him on the street. He petrifies in place, shivering in fear as I approach him. Petrified in place and was unable to break away. So when I reached him, I smiled to say hello to my new bestest of buddy. And I broke his stupid fucking nose again. and his nose this time almost collapsed on itself. His eyes busted out, and he screeched like a freaking old woman, "No, please don't do it. Don't hurt me anymore. No, no," as I began laughing and walking away. Robert Connelly then busted out with a small chuckle, but then shook it off, staring into Michael's eyes, and saw how scared shitless he was making him, which made Robert shrug a bit in discontent. Another week passed before I saw him again, and when I saw him again this time, he tried to make a run for it. But you know what? If he wants to be my friend, I'm going to honor him as a friend and teach him what it means to be friends with a swell guy like me. There's no chickening out now. So as I chased him down to greet my new bestest chum, I caught up to him, sacked him to the ground, and as he screamed out, "No, don't hit me anymore," I broke his stupid fucking nose again, spat in his face, and laughed, and laughed. Robert Donnelly seemed to want to burst out with a chuckle again, but frowned instead. Seeing something like that, seeing how there can be men as evil as me, seeing as how deeply I might be loving destroying him, so he became horrified beyond measures. Now truly unable to let go how there are men like me out there, his mind shattered, just as his flimsy, stupid nose would and had been doing every time I saw him. Robert Connelly then looked down at his right mitt and felt bored with it. Another week passed. I wasn't seeing him on the street as I used to, so this time I broke into his house to see him laying in bed. Frenchy boy there looked like a Looney Tune now, completely put out to green pastures. His eyes were spinning in his head as he wiggled his lips with his finger like they do in those cartoons you be watching, afraid out of his mind at how cruel and uncaring the world that he lives in can be. So then, as I went over to greet my new bestest of chums again, I walked over, stood over his bed, and smiled so tenderly like at him, so lovingly. And as he screamed in horror, saying the Reaper, I broke his stupid fucking nose once more and laughed in Irish glee. Robert Connelly was now unable to hold back his true nature as he busted out into laughter, his eyes widening in rapture by the rush, which was the first time Michael had ever seen his father open up like this to him. Most of the time he was a hollow, dreary man that spent his time at bars flatlining a storm, quiet, expressionless, and shrill. But now Michael was seeing him opening up to show the type of demons he was carrying. Demons that made him fancy being so cruel and twisted and out of boredom. Robert Connelly then looked into Michael's eyes again and grew a bit sad at how he was scaring him shitless. He then looked back to his right mitt and began to grow disgusted with it. But this time, besides his nose and mind shattering, something else truly shattered. His heart shattered, and now completely. And when that happened, he wasn't scared no more. Because I had been teaching him time and time again that there were men like me that did exist. And now he wasn't scared no more. He had taken a couple of lickings and had seen they weren't going to be the end of his world. And this time, when he looked up at me laying there in his bed, he cringed up with teeth, with blood in his eyes, and tried to lash out like a wild animal. And when he tried to attack me, I did went all out on him, beating him into a bloody, pulpy mess, left for the medics. Robert Connelly then looked to one side and seemed to be trenched in thought. A month had then passed. His Frenchy boy there had returned from the hospital. And on that day, when he saw his new bestest of friends, me, walking over to him, you know what? He wasn't scared of me no more. He wasn't screaming like some crazy old dame in horror. You know what he was doing? He was smiling, just as I was smiling back at him. So when I walked up to him to greet him by saying hello, by breaking his stupid fucking nose again, after I did, Frenchy boy there paused for a bit, wiped the blood off his face, licked it a little, smiled again, and said, "What else you got?" Robert Connelly then grew a faint, compassionate smile as he stared off for a bit more, but then shrugged it off and began to wonder, I know, maybe it's a cruel and lousy way to start a friendship. Maybe I ain't such a swell friend to him. Maybe I'm being downright lousy. Maybe it doesn't need to be that way, so I don't know. But what I do know is that man will never again be afraid out of his mind of men like me again, 'cause he now knows he can handle them. So I ask you, do you think I did him a service, or you think I did not? Robert Connelly then eyed Michael from the side and waited to see what his boy would say, what his response would be. So? But Michael had none. Well, anyways, if I ever catch you tearing up again, I'll break your stupid fucking nose again. I'll keep doing it until it sticks. Show me weakness again, son, and I'll learn you to regret it. Oh, trust me on that. You will learn the hard way to regret it. That I promise. You catch my drift? Michael then nodded. As his father went over to the kitchen fridge, took out some tequila, and began chugging it straight from the bottle. He then sat down and stared off into nothing, all very lonely-like, while his face began to turn red.